What happens when the scariest MMA fighter meets the biggest fighter? Have you ever seen this crazy fight with a huge 150-pound weight difference? Yes, it was a classic skill versus size matchup, and absolutely no surprise that it was one of the most watched fights of all time. You see, it wasn't just the ridiculous nutshot that made this fight so historic. What made it truly epic was the pre-fight history and the brilliant strategy of how to fight a much bigger opponent. If you watch this video to the very end, I promise you will understand exactly why this fight was so important. In the previous episode, we featured how the biggest fighter, Bob Sapp, took the MMA and kickboxing world by storm.
375 with abs.
Jesus.
Biggest human being I've ever seen in my life.
Before the historic fight with Cro Cop, Sapp had just beaten the greatest heavyweight kickboxer twice in a row by knockout. In doing so, he became one of the most feared fighters in combat sports. So respected that even Mike Tyson wanted to fight him.
That's real. With the mark of the Queensberry, I'm fighting tonight.
This 360-pound monster showed that without technique, pure size combined with effective strategy can beat even the best fighters. But how was it that Sapp could defeat the greatest kickboxer of all time, and a few months later, end up crying on the ground against the scariest MMA fighter? You see, many people no longer know this incredible fighter today, but during his time, he was the baddest man on the planet. Don't let this clip of him being scared of ice baths fool you.
Ajde, čekaj, nije ti počeo stopati, ajde, sjedni. Izdrži!
Mirko Cro Cop was the most feared striker in MMA and a great kickboxer. During his prolific run in Pride, he had a whopping 90% knockout ratio. That is, out of his 21 wins, 19 were by knockout. That means he had the highest knockout ratio in elite MMA history. His most devastating strike was his head kick. It was so powerful that anytime he fought, that's what all fight fans were waiting to see. He kicked so hard that he even possesses the most chilling quote in combat sports history. The famous saying goes as follows: when Cro Cop kicks you,
That's right leg hospital, left leg cemetery.
Oh.
due to his extreme knockout ratio, Cro Cop was widely regarded as the hardest hitting heavyweight in MMA history.
You know,
Well, he had just such ferocious, explosive power. Did he have the hardest leg kicks you've ever felt?
Cro Cop.
Cro Cop, really?
Yeah. This guy is just, at his best, it's just absolute, pure, like, explosive power, just destruction.
But he wasn't just a badass because he could fight. It was also who he was outside of the ring. Mirko Vilopovic was known as Cro Cop because he was also the commander of the Croatian anti-terrorist unit. As the best special forces officer, it was meant he was trained to destroy the worst of humanity. And as a result, he is a man who truly fears no one.
Yeah, there's nobody I fear.
His extremely calm demeanor combined with extreme power made him the scariest fighter to go up against during his prime. When he gets angry, even a prank scared the crap out of an interviewer.
I don't want to speak
Right,
anymore.
thank you.
I don't want to speak anymore. You understand it?
Thank you very much. I understand, sir, so thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, Mirko. I wasn't you, so yes, come here. Yeah, I will. Okay, thank you.
Right
Sorry,
now.
Mirko.
Do it right now.
I apologize.
Were you scared? Were you scared?
Of course I was. You were shitting your pants. I've never been through anything like that in my life.
Without a doubt, Cro Cop is widely considered one of the greatest heavyweight kickboxers and MMA fighters of all time, a true pioneer of the sport. Bob Sapp, on the other hand, just humbled the greatest kickboxer of all time after training only for 1 year. To make it even more humiliating, Ernesto Hoost thought he couldn't be beaten by him and laughed at him.
Not a fighter, he's a player. You don't know that pain. Message to Bob?
Yeah.
The best heavyweight in the world being manhandled by a monster. What a frightening experience it must be.
Bob Sapp mauled everyone he fought with illegal moves and a style that resembled King Kong. You might think that sounds ridiculous, but it was no exaggeration and an absolute nightmare for everyone. You see, even a jab could send his opponent flying. What made him so scary wasn't just that he was enormous, it was also how he wouldn't stop even when the fight was finished. Not even the referee could stop him from hitting someone after the bell. Or going full MMA rules when it's clearly just kickboxing rules. On top of all this, Sapp had just beaten Hoost twice in a row, and Hoost already defeated Cro Cop 3 times. This fight math means Sapp should easily beat Cro Cop, right? If you think so, you are sadly mistaken. At this time in history, no one wanted to fight Bob Sapp, but Cro Cop, the man who fears no one, stepped up to the plate. Not even the greatest heavyweight MMA fighter, Fedor Emelianenko, wanted to fight Bob Sapp.
Fedor wouldn't fight Bob Sapp.
Yeah.
In his prime, he's like,
Smart.
get the fuck out of here.
Sapp might seem like a joke to new fans today, but at this time, he was one of the most feared fighters, with only Cro Cop willing to stand up to the challenge. In just fighting for a year, Sapp legitimately became the biggest superstar Japan has ever seen.
He was an enormous superstar in Japan.
Yeah.
Enormous.
Before the fight, Cro Cop had a special message for Bob Sapp.
Bob, I love you. To who?
How are you going to fight tonight?
I don't know. We shall see tonight. I came without strategy this time.
No strategy?
No, not at all. Because I must try fight without strategy.
This was clearly a lie, because he came in with a brilliant strategy. Sapp's strategy was to rush Cro Cop early on like he does against all of his opponents.
Let's go for it in the first round always. Give it all I got. That never changes.
This would play into Cro Cop's strategy perfectly. Bull versus Matador. This historic fight provides epic lessons on how to beat a bigger and stronger opponent who charges forward. You see, the Bull must charge with brute strength to have a chance of winning. As such, Bob Sapp thrives on charging forward and creating chaos. The Matador, however, thrives on sidestepping, moving backwards and countering the charge. A prolific Matador thrives off creating order out of chaos. He uses the Bull's force against himself, evading the brute charges. When the time is right, the Matador spears the Bull. In the history of heavyweights, no man was a better Matador than Cro Cop, and no fighter bull rushed as much as Bob Sapp. Creating order out of chaos. There are some key tactics to note in this fight. Cro Cop has the habit of moving towards the power side, which is against conventional wisdom in southpaw versus orthodox matchups. Usually moving towards the power side is dangerous because you can run into an overhand easily. However, at a higher level, it is possible to do this safely by staying far enough away from the opponent during the exit. If there is real danger, then a well-timed duck and clinch engagement will save the day. With excellent footwork, Cro Cop either stayed in too close to punch or too far to punch, completely shutting out Sapp's dangerous mid-range. This is no surprise because he has over 100 amateur boxing fights at the highest level. Then Cro Cop attempted his infamous left high kick, and it landed, but it didn't hit flush because it was partially blocked by Sapp's huge arm. This, however, would set up for an important body kick later. You see, Sapp thrived in the mid-range, not the close range or the long range, and it's perfect for a sniper to pick off. The snipe and clinch strategy. To spear the Bull, Cro Cop would launch a left hand and then clinch to shut down the hard Bull rushes. This is very intelligent fighting and also Cro Cop's signature technique. The clinch and stall strategy is so effective against Sapp because he would tire himself out from rushing forward, and inside the clinch, he couldn't bully his opponent. The only thing Sapp landed effectively was essentially a huge uppercut to the nuts. Textbook southpaw strategy, varying high and middle kicks. Cro Cop would often change levels on the left kick, varying middle to high. That means if they're worried about defending a high kick, which they always were, it opens up the body for clear attacks. strategies combined. This would all play into how this fight ended. When Cro Cop moves back as Sapp moves forward, he baits him in order to create a collision for the left hand. When the body kick landed, Sapp reacted really hard. You see, the punishing left kick from hell got Sapp to drop his hands, which then opened up the opportunity to land a perfect left cross to the head. To assist the finishing blow, Cro Cop framed his lead arm to distract Sapp and measured the perfect distance. This would simultaneously load up the rear shoulder for a maximum powered cross. With the perfect kick and perfect left cross, this technique broke Sapp's orbital bone. Despite continuing to win many fights, Bob Sapp would never truly be the same after fighting Cro Cop. His aura of invincibility was lost, and people started to fight him much more intelligently. All of this was brilliantly planned, and Cro Cop had the perfect style for his enormous opponent. This specific style was also exactly why he transitioned so well into MMA.
What Mirko would do was have these big one shots. These big one kicks, he's just jump in with one shot, super fast and quick. That is really beneficial in MMA, more so even than kickboxing.
You see, styles make fights. And yes, Ernesto Hoost is a better kickboxer than Cro Cop. However, the standard Dutch kickboxing style is not the best style against Sapp, and it wouldn't transition so well into MMA either.
But Mirko was strong enough and fast enough to keep him off, which is the difference between his style and Ernesto Hoost. Though Ernesto Hoost is the better kickboxer, like what makes Mirko so dangerous in MMA is that he's explosive.
Now, before you try and diminish Cro Cop's accomplishment here, here's what Cro Cop said 10 years later. Believe it or not, everyone was terrified of fighting Bob Sapp, especially after he knocked out Ernesto Hoost twice in a row. He was a beast. He was a beast and still is a beast. I think if he changes something in his training or his mind, he would still be very, very dangerous, especially in MMA. He's a big, strong guy with devastating punches. Enormously strong. I remember his fight with Nogueira. Jesus Christ, Minotauro survived hell. It was the craziest fight I've ever seen. I couldn't believe that Minotauro was able to survive all the things that happened to him. He almost broke his spine. Unbelievable. After our fight, he loses fights with guys who are 50 to 60 kilograms lighter than he is, and he could beat them easily. Easily. Why he is doing that, I don't know. Cro Cop has retired from competition since 2019, but he went out on a 9-fight win streak in MMA and won 11 out of his 12 kickboxing fights. Without a doubt, he will go down as one of the greatest of all time, giving the fans unforgettable fights that will remain in our hearts forever. What do you think of this historic fight with a huge size difference? By the way, here's a wink from Cro Cop convincing you to subscribe. I really want to hit 500,000, so hit it if you haven't already. I'm Kenshin and
I love you.